A day I had envisioned in my mind for years, the one that would be the culmination of all my hopes and dreams. I had fallen in love with a man who not only swept me off my feet, but truly understood me, every piece of my soul. Our wedding day was meant to be magical. The day when the world stood still and love enveloped us like a warm embrace. The venue, an old mansion perched on a hill with a sprawling view of the city beneath, had been chosen to give us the elegance we dreamed of. The ceremony was set to be nothing short of breathtaking, with white roses lining the aisle, cascading in delicate drapes around the pillars, and the soft hum of a string quartet playing in the background. The grand chandelier shimmered above us, and in that moment, everything felt perfect. My heart was racing with joy as I walked down the aisle in my ivory gown, every step echoing with promises of forever. The eyes of the guests met mine with admiration, but most importantly, I felt his gaze, the man I loved, waiting at the altar, his face glowing with happiness. And then, in the midst of all that beauty, there was a cloud that darkened my heart. My parents. I had always known they didn't like him. From the moment I introduced them, they had never been entirely supportive of our relationship. He wasn't wealthy enough in their eyes. He wasn't from the right background. But love, as I had always believed, was about connection, not bloodlines or money. Yet, as I walked towards him, something was wrong. I could feel the coldness in the air, an invisible tension that clung to the moment. My parents, sitting in the front row, were staring at me, distant, their faces unreadable. They were both dressed in black, not just dark, somber clothing, but deep mourning black. My mother wore a sleek black dress, her eyes lined with makeup that did nothing to hide the pain in them. My father's suit was so black that it seemed as though he was in mourning for something long gone. I felt the weight of their silent judgment, a stark contrast to the joy I had expected. My heart fluttered with dread, but I told myself, it's just nerves. It's my wedding day and nothing is going to ruin it. The ceremony continued as planned, though I couldn't shake the feeling of their disapproval. I tried to focus on the love of my life standing before me, the vows we exchanged, the promises we made, and the future we were about to share. They had chosen not to share in the joy, but rather to sit there, conspicuously removed, like strangers in their own daughter's life. Once the ceremony was over, the reception began. The sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the murmurs of guests trying to enjoy themselves filled the hall. I found myself walking through the crowd, greeting friends, and trying to ignore the stinging glares of my parents, who remained silent in their corner, hardly acknowledging anyone. I should have known that something wasn't right, but I wanted to hold on to the fleeting moments of happiness. The band began to play soft jazz music, and the guests gathered around the dance floor, awaiting the first dance. His face had a look of determination, but there was an underlying sadness in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice loud and clear, cutting through the soft music. "Before we begin tonight's celebration, there's something I need to say. Something that has weighed heavily on my heart for years." The man who had always been so cautious with his words, now choosing to speak in front of everyone, when all I wanted was for this night to be perfect. He turned to me with a small smile, a sad one, but genuine. "I want to thank the woman who made me the luckiest man alive. But before I do that, I have to say something to her parents." I felt my face flush, my blood running cold. "I know you didn't approve of our relationship," he continued, his voice steady but his words sharp. "I know you tried to stop us from being together. But today, I'm doing what I've always wanted, marrying the woman I love." There was a silence in the room, thick and heavy. My heart felt as though it was sinking. I glanced over at my parents, whose faces were now ashen, their eyes wide in shock. My father, the man who had always been so proud and strong, looked small, vulnerable even. My mother's hands were trembling, her face twisted in a mix of disbelief and anger. But my husband wasn't finished. "There's something else," he said, his voice rising with a hint of emotion that echoed through the hall. "For years, you made her feel unworthy of the love she deserved. You never believed in us. And today I'm standing here, not just as her husband, but as a man who fought for what was right." I saw the shock and pain on my parents' faces as the room fell into an uncomfortable stillness. The weight of his words hung over us all. My breath hitched in my chest, and I wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, to tell him this wasn't the place for such a confrontation. But I couldn't. My body was paralyzed by the reality of what was unfolding before me. But what happened next? I could never have prepared myself for. The music, which had been playing in the background, shifted abruptly. The haunting melody of a song began to fill the space, a song I had grown up hearing, one my parents used to play on repeat when I was a child. It had always been their favorite, their love song they called it, but this song now sounded so different. It no longer held the sweet, nostalgic tone I had once associated with it. No, it now felt like a sharp, bitter reminder of everything I had tried to forget. As the song echoed through the hall, my parents stood up, their faces pale, and without a word, they left. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting, no angry exchanges. They simply stood, turned, and walked out. And in that moment, I realized that they had made their choice. They couldn't bear to be in the same room as us any longer. My wedding day, which was supposed to be a celebration of love, was now a battlefield of emotions. The guests were stunned into silence, unsure of what to do or say. My husband looked at me, his expression softening. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, but the damage was already done. The tension in the room was unbearable. The happiness I had once felt now seemed like a distant memory. I couldn't bring myself to run after them. Part of me wanted to chase after my parents, to beg them to stay, to explain that this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But another part of me, a part that had been hurt for so long, felt a cold rage brewing inside me. I had fought for love, fought for us to be together, and yet here we were, my family destroyed by one man's decision to finally stand up to them. But I wasn't ready to face that just yet. Instead, I stood there, in the middle of the reception hall, my wedding gown now feeling like a weight on my shoulders. My parents were gone. My husband had made a statement, and now all I could do was watch as the pieces of my life scattered around me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and awkward conversations. I had no idea how to salvage what was left. But the truth was, nothing could be salvaged. The damage had already been done. The man I had married had made his revenge clear, but what I didn't know yet, what I would soon come to realize, was that his revenge was just the beginning. The aftermath of that night felt like a wound that refused to heal. For days, I couldn't shake the heavy feeling in my chest, a sense of loss that was so deep, it consumed me. My parents, who had walked out in the middle of the reception, had left me in a storm of confusion, pain, and guilt. My husband, the man I had given my heart to, was no longer the man I had married that morning. His words, sharp and painful, had cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. I had tried to avoid confronting the situation for as long as I could. The day after the wedding, I stayed in our apartment, alone, surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The wedding gifts piled up untouched in the corner, the flowers wilting on the kitchen table, and the sound of silence reverberated in the rooms. I felt as though I were living in a foreign world, a place where everything I thought I knew about love, family, and happiness was turned upside down. He had broken something in me, something that had been fragile for years, and his words still echoed in my mind. "You never believed in us. You hurt her. You kept her from me." Those words cut deep, deeper than I was willing to admit. And as I sat in the empty apartment, I realized just how much I had buried over the years, the hurt, the longing, and the sense of betrayal. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he had thrown everything into the open, exposing the raw wounds of my past. My parents, with their disapproving glances, their constant criticism, their refusal to accept my choices. And Adam, the man I had married, had dragged all of that into the light without my consent. He had forced me to face the ghosts of my past in a way I wasn't prepared for. The days following the wedding were filled with tension, and the distance between Adam and me grew with each passing moment. I knew he was trying to make things right, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. The pain of what had happened on that day was too fresh, too raw. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. I couldn't pretend that I wasn't hurting, that I wasn't angry. I spent hours staring at the wedding photos we had taken before the ceremony. The ones where we were smiling, full of hope and love, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. The wedding video played in the background. The footage of us dancing, laughing, and sharing our vows now felt like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. My parents, who had been so distant from the start, had become the focal point of my pain. The way they had left without a word, their cold silence, their refusal to share in my joy, it all weighed on me. In the days after the wedding, I tried to reach out to my parents, but they wouldn't answer my calls. I knew there had been tension between us, but I had never imagined it would come to this. I had always believed that, despite our differences, they would eventually accept Adam and me. But now it seemed like that dream had shattered in front of me. I remember the first time I tried to speak to my father. I had called him several times, but he didn't pick up. After days of silence, I finally drove to their house, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me hoped that they would be understanding, that they would welcome me back with open arms. But when I arrived at their doorstep, I was met with cold indifference. My father opened the door slowly, his face tight with anger. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice strained. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice shaking. He stepped back, his face unreadable. He humiliated us in front of everyone. I stood there, stunned by his words. The man who had always been my protector, the man who had promised me that nothing would ever come between us, was now rejecting me. You don't get to decide who I love. You don't get to tear apart my life just because you don't like him. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing on the doorstep, the weight of his rejection heavy on my shoulders. I couldn't stop the tears that came after that. They poured out of me, uncontrolled, as I sank to my knees on the front step. My father had always been a man of pride, a man who believed in tradition and respect, but in that moment he had broken me. The father I had looked up to, the man who had always been my rock, had turned his back on me. And the worst part was, I knew he was doing it for his own reasons, his own sense of pride. He had always been afraid of losing control, afraid of letting go. But now he had lost me. The pain of that rejection was like nothing I had ever felt. It was the kind of pain that eats away at you, piece by piece. It was a betrayal of the deepest kind, one that I couldn't reconcile. And as I sat in my car, the tears still flowing, I realized that my wedding day, the day I'd once dreamed of, had turned into a nightmare I couldn't escape. I tried to reach out to Adam, but every conversation felt like a battle. I was angry with him, with my parents, with everyone. It felt like the world had crumbled around me and I was left to pick up the pieces. I wanted to understand why Adam had done what he did. I wanted to know why he had chosen to expose my family's flaws in front of everyone. But every time I asked him, I was met with the same response. I did it because I love you. I couldn't stand by and watch them tear us apart anymore. His words seemed noble, but they didn't make the pain go away. The hurt that had been buried inside me for years was now bubbling to the surface, and I couldn't stop it. Every word, every action from Adam felt like another reminder that the past couldn't be erased. My parents' rejection had been a wound that had never healed, and now it had been ripped open by the man I had married. One evening, as I sat in the living room, staring out the window, Adam came to sit beside me. "Nadia," he said softly, his voice filled with guilt. "I'm sorry for what happened. I never wanted to hurt you." I turned to face him, my eyes red from crying. "But you did," I whispered. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt us both. You made it so much harder to fix things." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "But sometimes the truth needs to be said. They need to understand what they've done to you." I could see the pain in his eyes, the same pain I felt. But it wasn't enough. The damage had already been done. My parents were gone. They had made their choice, and Adam had made his. I stood up abruptly, my heart pounding. "I need some space," I said, my voice firm. "I need to figure out what I want, what I need. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can forgive them." Adam reached out for me, but I pulled away. "I need time," I said again, my voice shaking. "I need time to think." He didn't argue. He just stood there watching me, his face a mixture of sadness and regret. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just angry with him. I was angry with myself. I was angry for letting this happen, for letting my family tear us apart, for not standing up for myself sooner. The fallout from that night had changed everything. I wasn't the same person anymore. I was broken, shattered by the choices of those I loved, and I wasn't sure how to put the pieces back together. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, it all consumed me. But one thing was clear. The love I once felt for Adam, the man I had married, was now tangled in a web of resentment and confusion. And I didn't know if we could ever find our way back to each other. The truth was, I wasn't sure if we ever could. The weeks after the wedding felt like a blur. Time moved on in a way that was both excruciatingly slow and impossibly fast. Each passing day seemed to stretch longer than the last, yet I could barely keep up with the flood of emotions that came crashing into me from every direction. My marriage, which I had once believed was the culmination of all my hopes and dreams, now felt like a fragile thread, unraveling bit by bit. And my parents, well, they were still absent from my life, and the silence between us was a constant gnawing ache. I had tried to reach out to them in the days following the wedding. My heart had been heavy with guilt, longing, and regret. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself that I was better off without their disapproval looming over me. But no matter how many times I called, no matter how many messages I left, they wouldn't respond. My father, once my rock, the man who had always held me close, now felt like a stranger. My mother, the woman who had taught me so much about love and sacrifice, now seemed distant and unreachable. Their absence weighed on me like a burden, a shadow I couldn't shake. It wasn't just their rejection of my marriage that hurt. It was the fact that they had walked away from me, leaving me to face the aftermath alone. And Adam, despite his earlier promises of love and support, had become a silent presence in our home. The gap between us, once filled with passion and understanding, now seemed unbridgeable. One afternoon, weeks after the wedding, I received a letter. It was addressed to me in my mother's handwriting, but it wasn't just any letter. It was a letter from her, one that had been sent to me after everything had fallen apart. It had taken me all this time to finally work up the courage to open it. And when I did, the words on the page hit me harder than I could have imagined. My dearest Nadia, I know you're angry with us. You have every right to be. We were hurt, but more than that, we were scared. Scared of losing you, scared of being left behind in a world that was changing too quickly for us to understand. You were always our little girl, and we've spent so many years trying to protect you, trying to shield you from what we thought were mistakes. We never wanted to hurt you, but in doing so, we hurt ourselves. We hurt you. We were wrong. We love you, Nadia, more than anything. Please come home. I folded the letter carefully, my hands trembling. The words on the page were both a balm and a wound. They were the apology I had longed for, the bridge I had hoped would form between us. But they also reminded me of everything I had lost. My heart ached, torn between the desire to forgive them and the realization that forgiveness would not come easily. Their rejection, their refusal to accept my love for Adam, was a wound that had cut so deep, and I wasn't sure how to heal it. But the question lingered in my mind. Could I forgive them? Could I let go of the hurt they had caused me, the years of silence and disappointment, and rebuild what had been broken? Adam, too, had tried to reach out to me during this time. He'd come home late most nights, his face etched with frustration and sadness. He knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way he reached for me, but I couldn't bring myself to let him in. I had felt so betrayed by him, so abandoned by the very person who was supposed to be my partner. He had humiliated me, forced me to face the ghosts of my past, and in doing so, he had torn a rift between us that I didn't know how to close. I couldn't understand why he had done what he did, why he couldn't have kept our problems between us, instead of exposing my family's faults for the world to see. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions that had no answers. Why had he done it? Why had he chosen to take revenge instead of trying to heal the wounds? It felt like he was protecting himself, protecting his own pride at the expense of everything we had built together. One evening, a few weeks after the wedding, Adam sat down next to me on the couch. The weight of his silence pressed against me, and I knew he was waiting for me to speak first. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. There was too much pain between us, too much unresolved hurt that I didn't know how to articulate. "Talk to me, Nadia," he said softly. His voice was raw, vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard before. "I can't stand this anymore. I need you. We need to fix this." I wanted to respond, to tell him how I felt, but I couldn't. The anger I had been carrying inside me was suffocating, and I didn't know how to let it go. "Why did you do it?" I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. "Why did you humiliate me like that? Why did you do this to us?" His expression faltered, and for a moment I saw the man I had married, the man I had loved so deeply. His eyes softened, filled with regret. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "But you didn't just make them understand, Adam," I replied, my voice shaking. "You tore me apart. You tore us apart. You exposed everything that was wrong with my family, and you didn't even think about what that would do to me." "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry. I can't take back what I did, but I want to try to fix it. I want to make things right between us. I can't stand the way we're drifting apart. I can't stand not knowing where we stand anymore." I looked at him, my heart aching. The man who had once been my greatest support was now the one who had hurt me the most. The man who had sworn to love and protect me had caused me pain in ways I never imagined. I wanted to forgive him, I truly did, but I couldn't ignore the deep wounds his actions had left behind. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. It's too much, Adam. You forced me to choose between you and my family, and now I feel like I have lost both of you." He reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "I don't want you to feel like that," he said urgently. "Please, Nadia, don't shut me out. I'll do anything to make it right. I can't lose you." His words hit me like a tidal wave, crashing over me with the force of everything I'd been holding back. I wanted to reach for him, to take his hand and tell him that everything would be okay, that we would get through this together. But I couldn't. I was too afraid of what it would mean to let him back in. The hurt was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. "Please, just give me some time," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "I need to figure this out. I need to heal. I need to know what I want, what's best for me. I can't make any promises right now." He nodded, his face etched with pain. "I understand," he said quietly. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." And with that, he stood up and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The silence that followed was deafening, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to truly feel the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the loss, the anger, the confusion, the love that I wasn't sure how to fix. As the days passed, I found myself torn between two worlds. On one hand, I wanted to reconcile with my parents, to heal the rift that had formed between us. I wanted to believe that we could move past everything, that love could overcome the years of misunderstanding and hurt. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore the pain Adam had caused me, the damage he had done to our relationship. I couldn't simply forgive him because he asked me to. It wasn't that simple. And so, I found myself at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. The question that haunted me, the question that had been with me since the wedding, was whether love was enough to overcome everything. Was it enough to heal the wounds? Was it enough to rebuild what had been broken? But the truth was, I didn't have the answers. Not yet.